get starting. I'm Joe.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, no matter what time zone you're in. Welcome back to Sip and Talk. I'm Sunny. Hi, everyone. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
I am too, but oh my gosh, I have to tell you about this just absolutely wild experience I had over the weekend.
Uh-oh, what happened?
Okay, so I have that gym membership that I haven't used in 6 months?
Yeah, the one you're always complaining about paying for.
Exactly. So I finally bite the bullet, I go in to cancel it, and I swear the manager practically barricaded the door.
Wait, really? Like physically?
I mean, he just stood right in front of me, stared me dead in the eye, and goes, if you leave, you are betraying us. Didn't we agree to get healthy together?
Oh, way. Are you serious?
Yes. It was like I was breaking a blood oath or something. I had to endure 30 agonizing minutes of just pure emotional blackmail. He's giving me the guilt trip of the century, all while aggressively shoving these, super expensive upgrade packages in my face.
That is completely unhinged.
Right. I obviously didn't want them. It honestly almost made me swear off exercising forever. Just out of spite, Honestly, I wouldn't blame you. But, hearing you describe that, it's actually kind of crazy how perfectly that maps onto, international politics. No, my gym trauma maps onto international politics.
But completely. Think about it. What you experienced is the textbook definition of a forced subscription, right? Emotional blackmail.
Definitely.
And in business, in relationships, whatever, there's this really basic rule: good things. People fight for them.
Yeah, they line up for them.
Exactly. If something is genuinely valuable, you don't have to trap people in a lobby to sell it. They just want it.
Yeah.
But if something is bad, forcing it on someone only makes them want to hit that cancel button even faster.
That makes total sense.
And that bizarre, guilt-tripping, forced subscription mentality. It is literally the exact microcosm of, the most intractable geopolitical dead knots we're dealing with today.
Oh, wow. Okay, I see where you're going with this. Because that perfectly bridges into that massive breaking news from May.
Yes. The 2026 reality check.
Exactly. I mean, we were looking at a historic paradigm shift here. South Korea's Unification Ministry just released their 2026 Unification White Paper. And for the very first time, ever in history, they formally defined the inter-Korean relationship as a peaceful coexistence of two states.
Which is huge.
It's massive.
Yeah.
They explicitly stated they no longer pursue absorption unification. So, to use your terms, South Korea has officially decided to hit the unsubscribe button on their neighbor.
Yeah, they're unsubscribing from a nuclear-armed, financially disastrous liability.
Totally.
And so that psychology, that forced subscription idea, it's exactly what we're going to use as the framework for today's Spin Talk.
I love it.
We're going to use it to dissect a phrase that you're constantly in the global diaspora, just all the time.
Are you Chinese?
Oh, man. That question.
Right. It operates as this ultimate cross-cultural political forced subscription. So today we're unpacking the whole psychology of push versus pull models of national identity.
It's going to be a heavy one, but so interesting. Yeah, and we'll explore why these forced subscriptions always fail and why the whole dynamic between Taiwan and China is becoming an exact mirror of this historic South and North Korea unsubscription.
Let's start by grounding ourselves in what just happened on the Korean Peninsula, because honestly, it's a watershed moment.
Yeah, we need the context.
Right. To understand why South Korea finally hit unsubscribe, you have to look at what North Korea has been doing. They literally amended their constitution to define South Korea as a hostile state.
Just putting it right there in writing.
Exactly. And they didn't just stop at paperwork. Did you see the footage? They physically blew up the Arch of Reunification in Pyongyang.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. That thing was massive.
Yeah, it was a 9-story monument over a highway. It was the ultimate symbol of one Korea, and they just demolished it. So South Korea's new white paper, this whole two-state theory, is really just a pragmatic countermove. The reality was already completely fractured.
Right. But let me push back on this a little bit, or at least play devil's advocate for the Sip and Talkers listening.
Go for it.
We're talking about South Korea here. They are an absolute global tech powerhouse. I mean, memory chips, EVs, shipbuilding, pop culture, they have it all.
Oh, absolutely. They're a juggernaut.
So why can't a roaring economic engine like that just carry North Korea? Look at history. In 1990, West Germany absorbed East Germany. It was bumpy, sure, but they pulled it off. Why can't Seoul just do what Berlin did?
People always bring up the German benchmark. And on the surface, it sounds super reasonable.
Right. It seems like the perfect precedent.
It does, but the structural data absolutely shatters that illusion. If you go back and look at the economic reports from right before German reunification, the GDP gap between West and East Germany was about 4-1.
Okay, 4-1.
Yeah, and the income gap was roughly 3-1. So it was a heavy lift, but mathematically they could manage it. But even then, even with that relatively narrow gap, it still cost West Germany between $1 to $2 trillion over 30 years.
$2 trillion, just for a 4-1 gap.
Exactly. They had to slap this solidarity tax on their citizens that lasted for decades. Honestly, they're still dealing with economic disparities in the eastern parts of Germany today.
Okay, so that's Germany. But wait, wouldn't a unified Korea offer, like, massive economic upsides? You always hear think tanks arguing that North Korea has all these rare earth minerals, plus this incredibly cheap labor force. Doesn't that offset the trillion-dollar price tag?
You hear that argument all the time, but it completely ignores the reality of human capital in a hyper-advanced digital economy. I mean, let's look at the actual math for Korea in 2025.
Hit me with the numbers.
South Korea's GDP is roughly $1.87 trillion. North Korea's. It's super opaque, obviously, but generous estimates put it between 30 and 40 billion.
Whoa, wait.
Yeah. We are not talking about a 4-1 gap. That is a 50 to 60 times difference.
A 60 times difference. That's not even the same universe.
It really isn't. And look at it per capita. South Korea is sitting at roughly $36,000 per person. North Korea is languishing at about $1,200. It's a 30 times difference in individual wealth.
That's insane.
Because of that astronomical chasm, the estimates to unify Korea range from $1 trillion on the extreme low end to well over $3 trillion. And as for that cheap labor argument you brought up...
Yeah, wouldn't they just put them to work?
Doing what? South Korea's economy is driven by AI, advanced robotics, semiconductor fabs. You can't just take a North Korean workforce that has been isolated from modern technology, starved of proper nutrition, literally stunted physiologically, and drop them into a clean room at a Samsung plant.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a really dark but true point. You're not just paying them a wage.
No, you'd be paying to rebuild their entire cognitive and societal infrastructure, decades of literal re-education, basic healthcare, and nutritional rehabilitation before they could even participate in the economy.
Okay, that makes total sense.
I like to think about it this way, just to make it relatable. Imagine you're a highly paid tech engineer living here in the U.S., right? And suddenly, you are legally forced to adopt a distant relative you haven't seen in 70 years. They live deep in the mountains, they've never seen a smartphone, no concept of the internet, completely different survival rules.
Oh man, that would be chaotic.
Right. Now imagine you're legally required to build them a modern house, educate them from scratch, and pay for their lifetime health care. That's not generosity. That is financial suicide for your own household.
That is a brilliant analogy. And it perfectly explains the generational drift we're seeing. Because when you look at how the younger generations feel, the ones who would actually be paying the taxes for this financial suicide, there is a complete and utter disconnect.
They were absolutely nothing to do with it.
None at all. I was looking at a survey from June 2026 focusing on South Korean youth, ages 19 to 39. Almost half of them, 49.8%, view North Korea purely as a hostile entity.
Wow. Almost half.
Yeah, and only 11.8% said they prioritize unification. You have to understand how 70 years of separation changes a culture. Gen Z in South Korea, they grew up in this hyper-competitive, high-stress society.
Oh yeah, the hagwons, the exam.
Exactly. They are dealing with astronomical housing costs in Seoul, grueling university entrance exams, a brutal job market. And you're asking that generation, which is already stretched to the absolute breaking point, to take on a $3 trillion charity project.
It's just not going to happen.
No. To them, North Korea isn't some tragic, lost sibling. They are a nuisance neighbor. They're the people sending trash balloons over the border and threatening to turn Seoul into a sea of fire.
Right. The language has drifted. The values have drifted.
The entire operating system is fundamentally incompatible. You can't expect young people to sacrifice their futures for this abstract concept of a bloodline unity they've never experienced.
Which brings us to the geopolitical red lines, because, Washington and Beijing are watching this just as closely as the people in Seoul.
Oh, absolutely. If we look at this from our perspective in Washington managing our Indo-Pacific strategy, the red lines are incredibly stark.
Very stark.
From the standpoint of our strategic interests, we have to look at how Beijing views this. A unified democratic Korea, operating under a free market system, with U.S. troops stationed right on the Yalu River, directly bordering China.
That's their worst nightmare.
It is their ultimate red line. They would never, under any circumstances, allow their strategic buffer zone to evaporate like that.
But on the flip side, we in Washington are just as terrified of a sudden collapse of the North Korean regime.
Oh, 100%. Because if Pyongyang collapses, you aren't just dealing with a localized financial crisis. You're dealing with loose nukes, unsecured chemical weapons, and millions of starving refugees pouring across the borders.
It's a logistical nightmare for our military planners.
Exactly. So, ironically, maintaining the status quo, this awkward two-state reality, is actually the safest option for everyone.
It really is. And this transition into pragmatism lets us look at the deeper philosophy of nations. Because your observation earlier about good things attracting and bad things forcing, it's deeply rooted in psychological logic.
Let's get into the brain science of this.
Yeah. Human behavior is governed by two fundamental systems. The approach system, which seeks out rewards and dopamine, and the avoidance system, which steers us away from loss and threats.
Right, the whole carrot and stick thing.
Yeah.
But let's dig into the mechanics of that approach system because it explains how countries build their national brands. When we talk about approach, we're talking about desire.
Exactly.
But the mechanism people miss is that for something to be truly desired, it can't just be good. It requires scarcity. If everyone has unlimited access to a product, there's no competition for it. Scarcity is the engine of value.
Yes. And when you look at how nations construct identity, you see this playing out on a massive scale. It boils down to a pull model versus a push model of statecraft.
I love looking at this through a brand strategy lens. From our perspective here in the U.S., we operate what I call the Hermes Club model.
Oh, that is a perfect name for it.
Right. It's the ultimate pull strategy. Our entire national identity is an exclusive club based on a civic contract and the Constitution. We don't just pull random people off the street in foreign countries, shove a passport in their hands, and force them to be American.
No, it's the exact opposite.
Exactly. How do we maintain our club? People queue for years, sometimes decades. They pay huge legal fees, undergo extreme vetting just to get a green card. We enforce the rules of this club through the Supreme Court and constitutional amendments.
And what's fascinating about our Hermes Club model is how that scarcity defines the value. The American brand represents rule of law, human rights, upward mobility.
All the good stuff.
Right. And because those things are highly desirable and, tragically, not universally available, the brand has massive intrinsic value. We set high barriers not just to keep people out, but to maintain the structural integrity of the club. People want to join because they see the lived benefits of our operating system.
Exactly. We make it hard to join because the product is highly desirable. But then you contrast that with what we see in the China model, which is essentially the inescapable clan model.
The ultimate push strategy.
Right. Break down the mechanism for us. Why do they rely on a push strategy?
It's purely structural. When a political system lacks the natural magnetic pull of modern civil liberties, like freedom of speech, an independent judiciary, transparent elections, it can't rely on people voluntarily clamoring to sign a civic contract.
Because they wouldn't sign it if they had a choice.
Exactly. So to maintain cohesion, the state has to rely on something much more primitive. The binding of bloodline, genetics, and ancestral morality.
So how does that actually work in practice?
It means the legitimacy of the state isn't based on an opt-in constitution. It's based on this heavily curated historical narrative of the century of humiliation and the promise of great unity. The idea is, if you share the DNA and the culture, you are permanently bound to the political entity.
And they enforce this through incredible digital authoritarianism, right? The Great Firewall, massive CCTV surveillance, the social credit system.
Yes, because that narrative of great unity is the very foundation of the state's legitimacy. Any defection, anyone hitting your unsubscribe button completely shatters the illusion.
Right, because if the system is objectively superior, why would anyone want to leave?
Exactly. To prevent the illusion from breaking, the state has to force the subscription. It literally cannot allow a successful alternative to exist.
But to be fair, and we have to analyze this objectively, we have to evaluate the trade-offs of both models. Neither system is perfect. Let's look at our U.S. model first. The major flaw in our Hermes Club approach is its cold Darwinism.
Oh, for sure.
Because it's a contract based on individual liberty and economic contribution. If you don't fit the mold or if you stumble, the safety nets are incredibly thin. You fall right through the cracks. We see this with our struggles regarding healthcare, homelessness, systemic inequality.
That is a very real critique. Our system can be incredibly harsh if you aren't thriving.
Yeah, and we see the political fallout constantly. When the economy dips or the middle class feels squeezed, What happens? Extreme nativism flares up. We get intense debates over border walls. When the members of the club feel threatened, their first instinct is to pull up the ladder.
That's so true. But on the flip side, the glaring flaw in the China model is what scholars call a massive soft power deficit. Now, to give credit where it's due, the inescapable clan model gives them terrifying mobilization power.
Oh yeah, they build things incredibly fast.
Right. High-speed rail, smart cities. They mobilize the collective instantly because they don't have decades of environmental reviews and local pushback like we do.
But the cost of that is psychological fragility.
Precisely. It creates this fragile, glass-heart defensive anxiety.
Yeah.
Because the identity is forced top-down, any refusal to conform, any hint of criticism isn't just a policy disagreement. It's viewed as an existential threat and a treasonous betrayal.
Right, it triggers this destructive collective anger.
Exactly. The state and the group attack anyone who steps out of line, which makes genuine soft power, the kind that makes people naturally admire your culture, almost impossible to sustain.
Which raises this really important question about how these massive philosophies collide in everyday life. Because this isn't just think tank theory, right? This plays out at dinner tables all over the world.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the ultimate forced subscription. That phrase we hear in the global diaspora constantly.
Oh, boy. Are you Chinese?
Yes, that exact phrase.
It is where the geopolitics gets incredibly personal. You can be at a warm dinner party in New York's Chinatown or a networking event in Silicon Valley, and someone casually drops that question, and instantly the temperature drops.
It just freezes the room.
Completely freezes it. Because depending on who is asking and who is answering, that question is a loaded weapon.
And we really need to dive into the history of this. Where did this come from? Because it's not just modern internet trolling. It has really specific roots.
It does. It goes back to September 1935 to a man named Zhang Bowling. He was the president of Nankai University. He posed what became known as the 3 patriotic questions to his students. Are you Chinese? Do you love China? Do you want China to be good?
And we absolutely have to contextualize 1935. This was not a time of peace. This was during the existential threat of the Japanese invasion.
Exactly.
The nation was fractured, militarily weak, facing literal destruction. I mean, shortly after he asked this, Japanese forces actually bombed Nankai University.
Right. So in that specific moment, Zhang Bowling's questions were a defensive, unifying rallying cry. It was about survival in the face of annihilation. But fast forward to today.
The context is completely gone. China is a global superpower.
Exactly. Yet the phrase has mutated. It evolved from a defensive shield into an offensive political weapon. It operates as a trap now, what sociologists call the essentialist nationalism trap.
Let's break down the mechanics of this trap. It works by conflating 3 entirely different dimensions of human identity that should definitely be separate. First, you have culture and ethnicity, eating the food, speaking Mandarin, celebrating Lunar New Year.
Right, the cultural heritage.
Second, you have the nation, the historical civilization, the poetry, the thousands of years of shared history. And third, you have the state, the modern political entity, the PRC passport, and loyalty to the current ruling party.
And the trap forces you to accept those 3 things as an indivisible trinity. The logic dictates that if you share the culture in genetics, you must revere the historical nation, and therefore, you owe unquestioning loyalty to the current political state.
Which is just crazy logic. I was thinking about this, and I came up with an analogy to show how absurd this trinity is if you apply it to literally anyone else.
It's here.
Imagine you're a 3rd-generation Italian-American living in New Jersey. You love making your grandmother's pizza recipe, you have Italian DNA, you celebrate your heritage.
Okay, classic Jersey setup.
Right. Now imagine the current mayor of Rome flies to New Jersey, walks into your pizzeria, points a finger at you, and says you eat pizza and have Italian DNA. Are you Italian? If so, you must support my new municipal tax laws in Rome, or you are a traitor to your ancestors.
That is completely laughable.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Binding DNA and culinary heritage to modern political obedience in a foreign country makes no sense.
But that is exactly how the question, are you Chinese, functions today. It's a political lie detector test. It weaponizes your grandmother's recipes to demand compliance with a regime.
And because it's such a loaded question, the reactions across the diaspora are wildly different.
Oh, completely. Look at mainland nationalists. They view that trinity as absolute law. If someone answers, no, I'm not, I'm American, they view it as a literal moral betrayal of the ancestors. They genuinely see it as collusion with foreign forces.
But then you look at Taiwanese or Hong Kongers, and it's totally different. They emphasize civic nationalism.
Yeah.
The response is like, look, I appreciate the culture, I celebrate the festivals, but politically, I am not PRC. My identity is tied to my democratic institutions, my right to vote, my freedom of speech. They've spent decades building a democratic operating system.
And then you have overseas Chinese and Americans of Chinese descent. When they hear this, they feel politically kidnapped by their own skin color. Their taxes, their loyalty belong to their adopted country, the US or Canada. They deeply resent the implication that genetics override their citizenship.
Which brings us to the most volatile intersection of all these themes, Taiwan and China. Because if you take this forced subscription psychology and the essentialist nationalism trap and apply them to our Indo-Pacific strategy.
You see why Taiwan and China are mirroring the South and North Korea dynamic?
Exactly. This is a critical pivot for global security. Recent think tank reports increasingly view the Taiwan-China dynamic and the SK-NK dynamic as identical structural dead ends. The 2026 reality is forcing everyone to acknowledge that some subscriptions simply cannot be forced.
And from our perspective in Washington, managing our Taiwan policy, this is the hard reality. There are 3 hard kill points that make forceful absorption an absolute disaster, not just for Taiwan, but for China and the global economy.
Let's break those down. What's the first hard kill point?
The first is irreversible democracy, or what we call organ rejection. Both Taiwan and South Korea possess a civic DNA built from the bottom up. Generations fighting for press freedom, judicial independence, democratic elections.
Democracy isn't just a coat of paint there, it's the fundamental operating system.
Right. If you try to forcefully install an authoritarian regime onto a society that breathes freedom, it's like a heart transplant, where the body violently rejects the new organ. To stop the rejection, the invader has to use massive doses of immunosuppressants.
And what do those look like in geopolitical terms?
Brutal political purges, total mass surveillance, dismantling civil society, re-education camps. You have to crush the immune system of the free society. But ultimately, that trauma kills both the organ and the host. You destroy the innovation you wanted to acquire.
Which leads right into the second hard kill point, the governance disaster. The Lowy Institute did a phenomenal study on this. They proved that military occupation does not equal governance.
Not at all.
Let's say theoretically an invasion is militarily successful. The beaches are taken. Congratulations, you just bought yourself a governance nightmare. You're now confronting 23 million educated, free citizens who know how to organize and fundamentally despise your system.
And factor in the geography. Taiwan is dense mountains and congested cities. You're looking at endless civil disobedience, sabotage of power grids, decentralized guerrilla resistance. You cannot run a modern, innovation-driven economy at the point of a bayonet. The tech hub would regress into a massive, astronomically expensive concentration camp.
It's a governance black hole.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the third most terrifying hard kill point, global supply chain brain death.
The semiconductor reality.
Yes. Taiwan isn't just a wealthy island, it's the beating heart of the global digital economy. We are talking about advanced nodes, specifically CoWoS packaging chip-on-wafer-on substrate and CPO, co-packaged optics.
Explain why those mechanics matter for the Sip&Talkers who might not be deep into semiconductor physics.
Sure. We basically reached the physical limits of making chips smaller on a 2D plane. To power massive AI clusters, we have to stack chips vertically. That's CoOS. And because processing all that data generates massive heat and latency, we're moving to co-packaged optics, replacing copper wiring with light-based photonics. Taiwan completely dominates this.
And the crucial thing is, these aren't just physical factories you can capture, turn the lights on, and run.
Not even close. This tech only survives because it's embedded in the Western trust chain. These fabs require continuous software updates from Europe, specialized chemicals from Japan, maintenance from American engineers, and the EUV lithography machines made by ASML in the Netherlands. They are the size of a bus and contain the most complex optics ever created.
And this is the kill switch reality?
Yes. Those ASML machines have remote kill switches. The moment an invasion starts, engineers in Europe can hit a button, and those multi-hundred-million-dollar machines are mathematically and physically bricked.
The Western world would immediately enact crushing sanctions and software lockouts.
We see this architecture being built in Washington right now. We see it with our aggressive tech restrictions. We just passed the CGPS Act, and look at what Trump is pushing regarding semiconductor reshoring and tariffs. The writing is on the wall. The invaders wouldn't capture a golden goose, they'd capture soulless, bricked machines. It would crash the global economy and halt their own tech advancement. It's mutually assured economic destruction.
It really is, but beyond the economics and the physics, there is a profound psychological chasm of identity that makes this mirroring of the Koreas so tragic.
Let's explore that emotional chasm. From the Chinese perspective, their worldview is rooted in the century of humiliation. Taiwan's separation isn't just an inconvenience, it's a bleeding historical scar. So when a Taiwanese person says, "I'm not Chinese, I am Taiwanese," it feels like a deeply personal moral betrayal. They view it as colluding with us in the U.S. to contain China's rise.
But flip the lens to the Taiwanese perspective, and it's rooted entirely in modern civic identity. Polling consistently shows over 60% identify strictly as Taiwanese.
And the mechanism behind that is important?
Yeah, the term China has been politically monopolized by the PRC. If a Taiwanese person travels abroad and says they are Chinese, the world assumes they belong to the PRC and support its policies. To protect their democratic way of life, they feel an existential need to draw a clear boundary.
It's a tragedy of hijacked terminology. To reframe this, let's move away from family metaphors and look at it like a corporate, hostile takeover.
I like that.
Imagine a massive legacy parent company that went through severe bankruptcy decades ago. During the chaos, a small division spins off, moves across the river, and starts a startup.
And that startup builds a completely different culture. Open source, flat hierarchy, heavily integrated into the global ecosystem. They become wildly successful on their own terms.
All right, now 70 years later, the legacy parent company recovers and becomes a massive conglomerate. They look across the river and say, "Hey, your founders worked for us. You use our foundational IP, therefore we own you. Merge back into our centralized structure."
And when the startup says, "No thanks, our valuation is based on our open source system, which your firewall would destroy," the parent company gets furious and accuses them of colluding with rival tech giants.
It's a fundamental inability to respect boundaries, driven by the need for total control. And that inability is the root of the forced subscription. Whether it's the gym rep trying to blackmail you, North Korea demanding reunification while pointing missiles at Seoul, or Beijing demanding political loyalty based on heritage, the mechanism of coercion is exactly the same.
So bringing this all together, the reality in 2026 is undeniable. History shows us that when political entities are separated for over 70 years, they evolve. They build their own success stories, their own civic contracts, their own values.
You simply cannot force someone to move back into a house they no longer recognize, especially if it requires surrendering their freedom. South Korea's 2026 pivot is a pragmatic shift toward two-state coexistence. And whether people admit it or not, that same structural reality applies to the Taiwan Strait.
If we connect all this to the bigger picture, it leaves us with a truly profound question. In an era where our celebration of individual freedom clashes with the innate human desire for a tribe, is it truly possible for a modern society to completely separate cultural heritage from political loyalty? If a nation's identity is so fragile that it requires force, digital surveillance, and military threats to maintain, what does that reveal about the underlying strength of its foundation?
That is an incredibly powerful thought to end on. Because the truth is that the subscription is genuinely good. You don't ever need to lock the doors to keep people inside. We want to thank all of our Sip and Talkers for joining us today for this conversation on the psychology of nations, statecraft, and identity. Remember, if you enjoyed this show, please hit that subscribe button, voluntarily of course, for the Sip and Talk podcast so you never miss a discussion.
And while you were online hitting subscribe, be sure to check out our old friend Mickey's YouTube channel, Mickey to Life. I was watching his latest travel vlog this morning, and it is absolutely hilarious. He is exploring Portugal, and he is walking on those terrifyingly slippery, polished cobblestone streets. And he looks incredibly nervous the entire time. It's a great, lighthearted palate cleanser after spending an hour unpacking geopolitical dead knots.
I definitely need to watch that. Mickey always cracks me up. Just to remind everyone, this discussion objectively analyzes geopolitical realities without discriminating against any nation or its people, and any mention of economic trends is for informational purposes, not financial advice.
Until next time.